The wind moves first, before sound, before light. It slips along the outer stones of Jerusalem and settles into the narrow spaces between walls that have stood longer than any single memory. Dust rises where hooves passed in the night and falls again without pattern. The city does not wake all at once. It exhales in stages. Stone releases the cold it held through darkness. Wood absorbs warmth reluctantly. Above the roofs, the sky pales without color, as if light itself approaches with caution. Jerusalem in this season carries weight differently. The ground is firm beneath the roads, worn smooth by years of passage. The markets lie closed, their awnings tied back, their tables bare but waiting. Nothing announces urgency, yet nothing rests. Even in silence, the city moves. He walks early, not from habit alone, but because the hour allows thought to remain unchallenged. His steps follow the inner circuit of streets between the western gate and the high quarter, where stone is older and shadows linger longer. He carries no mark of command beyond what custom requires. His cloak is plain. Its edges show wear from repeated use, not from display. The guards at the gate acknowledge him with familiarity rather than formality. He returns it with a nod and continues. This is not a man entering legend. He adjusts his pace to the uneven stones, slows where water gathered overnight, steps aside where workers carry timber through the narrow turn. His movement is ordinary. The city recognizes it. He has walked these roads before under different burdens. Now they respond to him without ceremony. Responsibility arrived here before intention. It took shape not through declaration but through absence. Authority passed into his hands as structures failed elsewhere, as voices fell silent, as decisions went unanswered too long. He did not seek the weight. It found him because it required someone present. He feels it first in the hands, the way they hesitate before resting. The way they linger on stone when passing a wall repaired too quickly. Judgment follows sensation. Ambition, if it exists at all, arrives later and remains uncertain. The city reveals itself through systems rather than scenes. Roads determine who eats. Markets decide which families endure. Wells govern peace more effectively than threat. He moves through these patterns without interrupting them, observing where rhythm falters. A stall left unopened. A cart delayed beyond its hour. Systems speak through small irregularities. By mid-morning, movement increases. Laborers emerge from side streets, tools balanced across shoulders. Donkeys pull loads toward the eastern market. He pauses near a junction where three roads meet, watching traffic distribute itself without command. This, too, is governance. Movement allowed to proceed. Disorder forms quietly. It does not announce itself with noise. It appears in hesitation, in glances exchanged too often, in the narrowing of paths once shared. A dispute over water rights has begun along the lower channel, not yet hardened into accusation. He does not approach it directly. He walks the length of the channel instead, observing where flow slows, where stone has shifted. Pressure reveals truth. He waits until usage increases, until need sharpens positions. Only then does he act, not with decree but with adjustment. Water is divided by time rather than claim. The solution displeases both sides equally. It holds. Restraint becomes the decision itself. To press further would turn compromise into rule before it has proved its endurance. Authority here is measured by what it delays. The city responds gradually. Markets open on schedule. Goods move without interruption. The disturbance recedes into routine. No one names it resolved. Resolution would suggest finality. Instead, precedent settles into place. As the day lengthens, he returns along the same roads. Stone warms beneath the sun. The wind returns in brief currents, stirring dust and cloth alike. He feels the weight settle deeper, not lighter. Leadership here does not announce success. It accumulates quietly. Jerusalem continues its work. The roads carry sound again. The city holds. The wind returns at mid-morning, rising from the valleys east of the city and pressing against the outer walls. It carries heat and dust together, a dry breath that settles into stone and skin. Jerusalem does not resist it. The city has learned to endure by opening and closing itself at the right hours. Gates adjust their rhythm. Markets shorten their noise. Movement tightens into necessity. Silence gathers where it can. Balian walks the inner circuit after sunrise, not along the walls but through the spaces that bind the city together. Courtyards, stairways, narrow streets worn smooth by centuries of feet. He moves without escort. His pace is measured, neither hurried nor slow. The city receives him as it does any figure of responsibility, with attention, not reverence. He does not carry the weight of legend here. That belongs elsewhere in memory or expectation. What he carries now is obligation. It has settled into his posture, his gaze, the way he pauses before entering shared spaces. Leadership in Jerusalem announces itself not through command but through exposure. Every decision echoes quickly. Every absence is noticed. Responsibility precedes intention. It arrives before clarity. Balian feels this most strongly in the early hours when reports come unevenly, incomplete, shaped by fear or hope rather than fact. He listens without correction. He knows the city speaks through fragments. Order must be assembled, not assumed. The systems of Jerusalem reveal themselves through repetition. Water distribution governs survival more tightly than any law. Bread schedules determine calm or unrest. Market oversight steadies the pulse of daily life. Justice here is not an abstract promise. It is a visible practice, performed where people can see its limits. Balian attends to these systems one by one, not as reforms but as continuations. He confirms existing arrangements, reinforcing them through presence rather than decree. Wells are checked. Storage is counted. Grain movement is observed at the hour when scarcity would show itself first. The city responds to attention. Disorder hesitates when watched closely. Threat does not announce itself with force. It gathers as pressure. Rumor thickens. Movement along certain streets increases, then stops. Balian notices where sound changes, where voices lower too quickly, where labor pauses without reason. These are signs of strain, not rebellion. They require restraint. He intervenes without spectacle. Guards are repositioned, not increased. Patrols adjust their routes, favoring continuity over intimidation. The city notices the shift and settles slightly. Authority here must feel familiar to be accepted. A moral decision forms quietly. Some urge decisive displays of strength. Others argue for preemptive restriction. Balian weighs both and chooses neither. He holds the line of restraint, not from indecision, but from understanding. Force would fracture the fragile alignment that still holds the city together. Instead, he reinforces method. Schedules are clarified. Duties are reaffirmed. Accountability is tightened without punishment. The structure absorbs the pressure. Stability increases not through action but through consistency. The cost of this choice registers later. Fatigue creeps into the edges of his awareness. Decisions linger longer than before. He carries them home in the evening, feeling their weight in silence. Leadership here offers no release. As days pass, the city adjusts. Markets reopen their full hours. Water disputes lessen. Bread lines shorten. These changes are modest. They matter. Balian begins to see beyond the immediate. Jerusalem is larger than any single moment of crisis. It is layered time, stone upon stone, habit upon habit. His role is not to redirect its course, but to prevent its unraveling. Succession remains distant but present in thought. He notes who acts with care when unsupervised, who corrects quietly, who understands restraint. Authority must be transferable or it becomes brittle. Evening returns with familiar light. The sun lowers behind the western hills, casting long shadows across the courtyards. The wind eases. Stone releases its heat slowly. The city breathes. Balian stands near a cistern, listening to water settle after use. Movement continues around him, ordinary and unremarkable. That is the measure of success here. Power, he understands, is not held in moments of command, but in the preservation of ordinary days. Heat gathers earlier now. By the time the sun clears the eastern ridge, stone already holds warmth from the day before. The city adjusts its breathing. Doors open for shorter spans. Movement condenses into purpose. The wind no longer roams freely through the streets, but funnels itself through passages shaped by habit and necessity. Balian senses the shift without being told. Responsibility sharpens when the margin for error narrows. He moves through the city with increased attention, noting how quickly labor tires, how patience thins as the day advances. Jerusalem in this season requires balance more than direction. The burden of obligation begins to separate itself from personal will. Decisions are no longer judged by preference or even conviction, but by consequence. He understands now that leadership here is not the pursuit of order, but its maintenance under strain. What already exists must be held together. Systems press forward into clarity. Water carriers alter their routes to avoid conflict. Bakers adjust output to match supply rather than demand. Market officials extend oversight into the quiet hours when shortages first appear. These are not innovations. They are refinements shaped by experience. Balian reinforces them with presence rather than proclamation. Justice becomes heavier work. Disputes arise over access, over timing, over perceived advantage. None are large alone. Together they threaten cohesion. He hears them patiently, allowing repetition to expose truth. He issues decisions sparingly, favoring solutions that preserve relationship over those that assert authority. Threat emerges as alignment failure. A section of the city begins to act out of rhythm with the rest. Goods linger too long in one quarter. Movement stalls where it should flow. Balian notices and intervenes early. He redirects supply, not people. He restores pattern rather than assigning fault. Pressure mounts from within his own circle. Advisors urge firmer measures, citing risk, urgency, reputation. He listens without dismissal. He does not yield. Restraint here is not hesitation. It is choice. Force would accelerate collapse by stripping away trust. He commits instead to method. Rules already in place are enforced evenly. Exceptions are withdrawn. Predictability becomes the message. The city responds not with gratitude but with compliance. That is enough. The internal cost deepens. Sleep grows shallow. Thought circles back to unresolved tensions. He carries the city into quiet moments, measuring outcomes that cannot yet be seen. Leadership begins to isolate, not through distance but through awareness. Yet continuity asserts itself. Daily life resumes its pattern. Children move through streets without urgency. Markets hum steadily. The sound of routine returns. These are signs of alignment restored. Balian reflects without indulgence. The city is not saved, it is sustained. That distinction matters. Survival here is not triumph. It is postponement earned through care. Succession remains unspoken but active. He delegates selectively, observing who preserves balance when pressure rises. Authority must be capable of dispersal, otherwise it breaks. As evening falls, the wind returns faintly, cooling stone and skin alike. Jerusalem settles into night. Lamps are lit. Water rests in its channels. Balian pauses at the threshold of a courtyard, listening to the city breathe. Leadership, he understands now, is the discipline of keeping many lives aligned long enough for another day to arrive. The city changes its sound before it changes its shape. In the early hours, before heat presses fully into the stone, Jerusalem carries a low murmur, the layered breath of many small actions beginning at once. Water jars strike pavement. Wooden shutters open and close. Footsteps cross the same paths worn smooth by years of repetition. The wind moves unevenly now, caught by walls and towers, slowed, redirected. Silence no longer belongs to open land. It lives only in brief pockets between motion. Balian enters these hours deliberately. He does not hurry. Speed unsettles systems already under strain. His route is familiar, chosen less for efficiency than for exposure. He passes wells, storehouses, narrow streets where traffic tightens and tempers follow. Responsibility here announces itself through friction. Where movement slows, pressure gathers. His presence is unadorned. No herald precedes him. Authority that requires announcement has already weakened. He watches how people adjust when they see him, not to measure loyalty but to sense fear. Fear distorts behavior. Calm restores pattern. He offers little beyond attention. The city's systems reveal themselves most clearly at their edges. Supply lines stretch thin as demand concentrates inward. Grain arrives, but distribution falters. Bakers compete for fuel. Water access shifts subtly, favoring proximity over fairness. None of this is malicious. Survival rearranges priorities without asking permission. Balian follows these currents patiently. He traces them back through records, through habits, through the small accommodations made during earlier months that now compound into imbalance. Correction cannot be sudden. Sudden change creates new fractures. He adjusts schedules rather than quotas. He extends access windows instead of seizing control. Justice becomes a matter of timing. Decisions delayed too long invite private resolution. Decisions made too quickly harden resentment. He listens until patterns emerge, then speaks briefly. His rulings do not satisfy everyone. They hold the line, that is their purpose. A disturbance surfaces near one of the market gates. Not violence, withholding. Goods remain unsold, held back in anticipation of higher need. The act is quiet, almost invisible, but its effect spreads. Prices lift, trust thins. Balian approaches without accusation. He observes, he confirms. The pressure to punish arrives immediately from those tasked with enforcement. A display would reassure. It would also teach concealment. He refuses it. Instead, he orders the release of stored goods at fixed measure, supervised but not seized. The precedent is clear. Control without humiliation. Obligation without spectacle. The response is muted. That is its strength. Trade resumes its flow, slower at first, then steadier. Others take note. Order is restored not by fear, but by predictability. The cost of this approach accumulates within him. Each restrained decision requires sustained presence. Absence would invite reversal. He carries the city with him through the day, through each intersection of need and resource. Leadership here is not episodic, it is continuous. By afternoon, the heat has fully settled. Stone radiates it back into the air. Movement compresses into shadowed routes. Labor slows. Balian withdraws to interior spaces where records are kept. He reads not for instruction but for memory. The city's past decisions linger in ink and habit. Some still serve. Others must be allowed to fade. He marks changes carefully. Nothing dramatic. A revised allotment. A clarified duty. Small adjustments that, taken together, realign the whole. Systems respond gradually. Resistance softens when change feels inevitable rather than imposed. As evening approaches, the wind stirs again, lifting dust from the streets before letting it fall. Lamps are lit earlier now. Night brings no relief, only pause. The city holds its breath between days. Balian stands beneath an archway and watches the light recede from stone. He feels the weight of what remains unresolved. He accepts it. Leadership does not conclude. It persists. Jerusalem settles into its night rhythm, held together by routines refined under pressure. The roadways empty, the markets close, water rests in its channels. What endures is not command but alignment. The city survives not because it is forced to, but because its parts are kept in relation long enough to carry one another forward. Morning returns with less clarity than before. Light reaches the city in fragments, slipping between towers, catching briefly on stone before withdrawing again. The air holds yesterday's heat, released slowly from walls that never fully cool. Jerusalem does not wake cleanly. It resumes. Balian moves early, not out of urgency, but habit. The city's strain has begun to show itself in repetition. The same disputes reappear with altered faces. The same shortages echo through different quarters. Responsibility now lies less in solving new problems than in preventing old ones from hardening. He walks the inner routes first. Narrow streets where sound carries poorly, where grievances grow inward before they surface. Here, labor begins before daylight fully settles. Bakers prepare what grain remains. Water carriers measure carefully. Survival sharpens arithmetic. Every excess becomes visible. The systems governing the city no longer function independently. Markets press against justice. Justice leans on supply. Supply depends on roads that now carry more people than goods. Balian observes this interdependence with growing weight. A failure in one place reverberates everywhere. Reports reach him without ceremony. A labor group has abandoned one section of wall repair, claiming unpaid work. Another refuses reassignment to less visible tasks. Pride has entered necessity. This troubles him more than hunger. Pride resists correction. He approaches the site himself, not to command but to witness. The wall stands incomplete, its stones stacked but unset. The work is not beyond capacity. The refusal is deliberate. He listens. He allows frustration to empty itself without interruption. The impulse to compel is strong. Delay threatens more than comfort. It threatens safety. He resists it. Force would secure compliance today and breed withdrawal tomorrow. He chooses patience, though it costs time he does not possess. Instead, he reorders obligation. Payment is not increased, it is clarified. Work schedules are redistributed, balancing visible and invisible labor. The solution satisfies no one fully. It restores motion. That is enough. This decision sets a tone. Others adjust before conflict reaches him. The city begins to correct itself in anticipation of his response. Authority spreads through expectation rather than decree. Yet disorder does not recede entirely. It changes shape. Small thefts increase near storage sites, not coordinated, desperate. Guards respond unevenly. One oversteps. A punishment is applied without measure. Balian intervenes again. Quietly, the guard is reassigned, the penalty reduced. Word spreads quickly, not of leniency but of boundary. Restraint is now visible. It carries risk. He accepts it. Institution begins to form where judgment has been repeated. Protocols are written, then rewritten. Oversight is paired with accountability. Roles are clarified. The city's governance thickens, gaining layers rather than edges. Expansion follows, but only inward. Administrative reach extends into areas once left to custom alone. Not to dominate them, but to stabilize them. Markets adopt fixed hours. Storage access is scheduled. Water distribution is logged. The city resists briefly, then adapts. The cost of this deepening structure settles into Balian's body. Fatigue no longer arrives suddenly. It remains. Sleep shortens, thought stretches. Leadership here consumes attention without offering release. Loss arrives without announcement. A long-serving official collapses during midday work. The city pauses briefly, then resumes. Replacement is chosen from those already carrying responsibility. Continuity absorbs absence. Balian feels it sharply, then moves on. He begins to reflect on endurance rather than outcome. The city will not be saved by singular acts. It will survive through alignment maintained over time. His role is not to command that future, but to prepare it. As days repeat, the moral question evolves. Restraint no longer feels like choice. It has become necessity. Force would undo what structure has begun to hold. Jerusalem responds. Movement smooths. Disputes shorten. Markets regain rhythm, though volume remains thin. Stability does not restore abundance. It preserves function. Evening returns again with the same slow settling of light. Lamps flicker on. Stone releases warmth reluctantly. The city exhales. Balian stands once more at a high point overlooking intersecting roads. He does not survey, he listens. The sound is uneven but continuous. That continuity matters more than harmony. Leadership here is not victory. It is maintenance under pressure. The city endures because its systems have been held together long enough to carry strain. What remains is the work of restraint, repeated until it becomes habit. The city does not sleep deeply anymore. Even at night, movement continues in fragments. Footsteps pass along stone corridors. Guards exchange positions with measured quiet. Fires burn low but constant, their glow reflected in walls darkened by age and use. Jerusalem endures its nights cautiously. Morning arrives with a thinner light. Dust hangs where it should have settled. The air carries the weight of bodies living closer together than the city was built to hold. Balian wakes already aware that the balance he has been maintaining is narrowing. There is less room for correction now. Each decision presses against another. He begins the day within the city rather than at its edges. The outer defenses have been stabilized for the moment. What threatens now comes from compression, not attack. People crowd markets not to trade, but to secure position. Survival reshapes behavior. Grain distribution has become the city's most fragile system. Supplies exist, but movement is uneven. Some quarters receive more frequently than others. Rumor fills the gaps left by delay. Rumor travels faster than carts. Balian studies the records again. Tallies match inventory. The failure is not theft. It is timing. Roads within the city have become constricted by congestion. Laborers assigned to transport are diverted to other tasks under pressure. Small decisions accumulate into shortage. The solution presents itself harshly. He could centralize distribution completely, suspend customary access, and impose strict rationing enforced by guards. The method would be effective. It would also fracture trust that has not yet broken. The pressure intensifies when a disturbance breaks out near one of the storage points. Voices rise. A line collapses. A sack is torn open. Grain spills onto stone. Guards move in too quickly. A man is struck. The crowd recoils, then presses forward again. Balian arrives before the situation spreads. He does not speak immediately. He observes the posture of the crowd, the guards' grip on their weapons, the way fear sharpens movement. Violence is close now, nearer than before. Impulse urges decisive force. A single display could scatter the gathering. It would also teach the city that hunger answers to fear. He refuses that lesson. Instead, he orders the gates of the storehouse opened fully. Distribution begins at once, not by privilege but by sequence. Names are taken, quantities fixed. Guards step back. The crowd hesitates, then settles into motion. The choice costs him. Reserves thin faster than planned. He knows this. He accepts it. A city held by force would consume itself from within before any enemy arrived. The decision ripples outward. Other storehouses follow the example without instruction. A pattern forms. Access becomes predictable. Predictability quiets rumor. Institution emerges from repetition. Distribution schedules are posted and enforced uniformly. Transport routes are reassigned exclusively to supply movement during certain hours. Labor allocation adjusts to support the system rather than compete with it. Stability deepens, but strain remains. Balian feels it in the slowing of his own responses. Each decision now carries longer shadow. He sleeps less, not from worry alone, but from constant calculation. Loss surfaces again. A child collapses during the distribution, weakened by prior scarcity. The body is carried away without sound. Work pauses briefly, then resumes. The system holds. The cost is not erased. Balian absorbs it inwardly. Leadership does not permit grief its full shape. There is no time. There is only continuation. As days pass, the city adapts. People arrive earlier, wait longer, accept less argument. Guards relax slightly, their posture less rigid. Trust rebuilds not through abundance but through consistency. The moral pressure shifts. Restraint is no longer about refusing force. It is about sustaining patience when patience no longer feels sufficient. He chooses it again. Threat does not vanish. It recedes into background tension. Balian senses it in silence more than noise. The city has learned to contain itself. Institution strengthens further. Record-keeping improves. Oversight decentralizes. Responsibility spreads outward from his person into defined roles. Authority begins to outlast presence. The cost continues to accumulate. His body carries fatigue like an extra layer of clothing, never removed. His thoughts return repeatedly to what has been set in motion and what cannot be undone. Reflection comes late at night when the city's sound thins. He understands that leadership here has narrowed his life but widened the city's capacity to endure. The exchange is uneven. It must be. Succession begins to take form without announcement. He observes who acts with restraint under pressure, who resists impulse when unobserved. These are noted quietly. Responsibility will pass through practice, not declaration. As another evening settles, lamps flicker across Jerusalem's uneven surfaces. Roads remain passable, markets close on time. Storage holds. The city has not been saved. It has been steadied. What endures is not the avoidance of collapse, but the cultivation of order sufficient to withstand fear. Restraint has become the city's unseen defense, and in its repetition, it has begun to take root. Wind moves differently along the walls now. It no longer rushes unchecked through open gaps, but breaks and redirects against scaffolding, stacked stone, and the temporary structures that have grown where space allowed. The city's outline remains the same, yet its interior has thickened with use. Balian spends less time intervening directly. This is deliberate. Presence solves immediate problems, but it prevents systems from learning their own weight. He watches instead, often from a distance, noting where procedure replaces hesitation and where habit begins to harden into rule. The distribution system continues without his hand. Ledgers are kept by men who once counted only their own goods. Errors still occur, but they are corrected through process rather than force. Appeals follow sequence. Disputes are heard at set hours. The city is learning when to wait. Justice shifts accordingly. Petty conflicts no longer reach him. A small council forms, not announced but recognized through repetition. The same figures appear each time judgment is required. Their authority is not declared. It is accepted because it functions. Balian does not rush to formalize it. Formality freezes what may still need to bend. He allows inconsistency at the edges while insisting on fairness at the center. Order grows best when it is allowed to breathe. Labor is reorganized next. Repair crews rotate instead of exhausting themselves in place. Stone is salvaged and reused rather than quarried anew. Waste is collected with more discipline, not for cleanliness alone, but to prevent illness that would drain already thin strength. Roads inside the city are marked subtly. No signs are raised, but everyone comes to know which paths carry food, which carry water, which are left clear for the injured. Movement acquires rhythm. Congestion eases. Markets change character. Trade narrows to essentials. Price controls are enforced not by threat, but by access. Those who comply receive priority placement. Those who resist find themselves waiting longer, selling less. Behavior adjusts. Threat still exists beyond the walls, but it presses less urgently than before. Disorder inside would now be more dangerous than any sudden assault. Balian understands this and directs attention inward. Rules accumulate carefully. None are dramatic. Each is small, precise, and repeatable. Together they begin to resemble something durable. The cost of this transformation is subtle. Flexibility diminishes. What once could be decided in a moment now requires sequence. Some resent this. They feel the city slowing. They mistake stability for weakness. Balian hears the murmurs but does not respond to them. Systems cannot argue. They can only function or fail. He commits to function. Fatigue deepens, but it changes shape. It is no longer the exhaustion of constant reaction. It is the weight of maintenance. Keeping order is quieter than creating it, but it never ends. He notices how often he now thinks in terms of continuity rather than outcome. Decisions are measured by how they will be carried by others, not how they will be remembered. His own role narrows further. One evening he walks the interior roads alone. Lamps are spaced evenly. Guards stand without tension. People pass him without recognition or pause. This is not loss of authority. It is its confirmation. The city moves without him at its center. That night the wind runs along the walls again, steady and contained, shaped by what has been built in its path. Structure has taken hold, and where structure holds, endurance begins. Time settles into repetition. Morning light reaches the same corners of stone. Shadows shorten and lengthen in familiar patterns. What once felt provisional now carries the weight of routine. Balian feels the change most clearly in silence. The urgent summons have thinned. Messengers still come, but their pace is measured. Problems arrive already shaped by discussion, already narrowed by precedent. He is asked to confirm rather than to invent. The systems hold. Water continues to flow along its routes. The cisterns are checked by men who no longer wait for instruction. Repairs are logged, not merely attempted. A crack discovered in one place is noted elsewhere, because the city has learned to think in connections. Food distribution stabilizes. Hunger does not vanish, but it becomes predictable. Predictability allows preparation. Reserves are counted weekly. Losses are recorded without blame. Waste is corrected methodically. This stability does not announce itself. There are no moments of relief. Instead, strain becomes bearable. Endurance replaces hope. Balian watches how authority migrates. A clerk corrects a soldier without fear. A laborer delays a noble's request because the schedule requires it. These acts are small, but they repeat. Power is dispersing, not collapsing. He understands that this is the most dangerous phase. Expansion is tempting now, not outward but inward. The urge to formalize everything, to perfect, to impose clarity where ambiguity still protects balance. He resists it. The city grows strong by narrowing, not widening. Functions become precise. Roles become limited. Ambition is trimmed. Threat beyond the walls remains constant. It is present in the distance, in the way sentries still scan the horizon, in the way supplies are never allowed to drift below minimum. But it no longer dominates thought. The city no longer lives only in anticipation of violence. Instead, it lives in adjustment. Markets open and close at fixed hours. Labor shifts rotate. Even prayer settles into quieter rhythm, less performative, more habitual. Faith becomes private again. Balian feels the cost personally. His days are filled with review rather than action. He signs more than he speaks. He listens more than he decides. Fatigue accumulates not from effort but from vigilance. There are moments when he misses the clarity of crisis. Crisis simplifies choice. Stability complicates it. Every decision now touches unseen threads. He walks the walls often, not to survey the enemy but to measure the city's breathing. The sound of movement below, the spacing of lamps, the evenness of patrol steps, these are his indicators now. One afternoon, a minor dispute reaches him by mistake. Two men arguing over access to tools. He redirects it without comment. The men leave embarrassed, not chastened. They have learned that his attention is reserved for larger fractures. This is success, though it carries no satisfaction. Gradually, others begin to speak of future arrangements, not plans but contingencies, if this fails, if that changes. The city is learning to imagine beyond the present moment. Balian does not encourage this openly. Imagination can drift into expectation. Expectation invites disappointment. He keeps the frame narrow. Still, continuity presses forward. He notices younger men observing procedures closely, learning not through instruction but through repetition. They copy methods, not commands. Knowledge is transferring without ceremony. At night, when the city quiets, he feels the full weight of maintenance. Stability demands constant presence, even when unseen. It asks for endurance without recognition. The wind returns again as it always does, brushing stone, threading through narrow streets, no longer carrying urgency, only motion. The city holds. And holding, it begins to outlast the moment that formed it. The cost arrives quietly. It does not announce itself as loss, but as thinning. Days stretch without distinction. Decisions blur into one another. What once required judgment now requires endurance. Balian feels it in his body before his thoughts. Sleep shortens. Meals are taken without awareness of taste. The city's rhythm continues, but his own narrows, focused only on continuity. Names begin to slip. Not important ones, not the officers or stewards, but the ordinary men whose faces once anchored the city's labor. He notices this absence and understands it as a warning. Leadership consumes memory first. The walls remain intact. The markets function. Justice is applied evenly enough to avoid rupture, yet the burden has shifted inward. Responsibility no longer presses from outside. It resides within him, constant and unrelenting. He marks the passing of time by repairs, stones replaced, beams reinforced. Sections reinforced twice, not because they failed, but because he cannot allow surprise. Aging is measured not in years, but in maintenance. Loss takes subtler forms. Friends move away from him without leaving. Conversations shorten. Silence grows heavier, not because words are forbidden, but because explanation feels unnecessary. Authority isolates by efficiency. He begins to prepare others without declaring it. Tasks are reassigned incrementally. Decisions are reviewed, then delegated, then reviewed again from a distance. He watches how responsibility settles on different shoulders. Some carry it well, others falter briefly and recover. The city absorbs these variations without drama. Structure compensates where individuals weaken. This is how continuity forms, not through declaration but through accommodation. Balian reflects less on his own future than on the city's endurance without him. The thought does not frighten him, it steadies him. A system that cannot survive its steward is not a system, only an extension of will. He steps back in small ways, allows delay where once he demanded immediacy, permits others to err within bounds. The city responds with cautious confidence. Succession is not named. It does not need to be. Responsibility transfers through repetition, through familiarity with process, through shared restraint. Leadership becomes less visible, more distributed. The wind moves again along the same paths it traced at the beginning. It touches the same stones. It carries the same dust. The city has changed, but the land has not. Balian stands once more at the walls, not to measure threat, but to listen. The sound below is steady. Life continues without reference to his presence. This is the final proof. What endures is not the figure who held authority, but the shape of care left behind. Systems outlast intention. Restraint leaves deeper marks than force. Stone remembers pressure. Roads remember feet. Cities remember those who chose not to dominate them. And so continuity is not preserved by triumph, but by the quiet discipline of holding what has been entrusted long enough for others to carry it forward. The city breathes through its own rhythms now. Streets that once awaited Balian's inspection carry traffic and sound with a steady predictability. Merchants call prices set months before. Repairs continue without instruction, and justice unfolds according to procedures he has embedded. Authority has become invisible, diffused into the system itself. He walks less. When he does, it is to observe rather than direct. Each step confirms that the city has absorbed the lessons of restraint, structure, and continuity. Where he once acted, now processes act in his stead. The weight of decision has shifted outward, carried collectively by those trained in patience and care. Responsibility now rests in layers rather than a single hand. Stewards govern markets, guards patrol with understanding of precedent, and records guide action. Errors are caught early, corrected without spectacle. Disorder exists only as a possibility, managed by method rather than intervention. Loss has left its mark quietly. Familiar faces are fewer, companions of past years gone to necessity, age, or duty elsewhere. Yet the absence is absorbed into the city's function. The systems he maintained endure despite the gaps. He acknowledges this without sentiment. Endurance is impartial. The seasons pass with the same rhythm that first drew him to vigilance. Winter cold tests walls. Summer heat presses on grain stores. Spring rain softens the roads. Each challenge is met by preparation, precedent, and careful attention rather than sudden effort. The city moves with its own memory. Balian feels the internal cost of years as a subtle fatigue. It is no longer acute, no longer urgent, but persistent. It manifests as thought that lingers at dusk, eyes that observe the smallest discrepancy, and a body that carries the weight of invisible labor. Leadership has become a slow, enduring strain. Succession has been realized in practice, not proclamation. New stewards handle disputes, assign labor, and oversee trade. Authority flows naturally to them, supported by precedent and method. Balian's presence is no longer required to enforce it. The city is self-sustaining. Reflection settles upon him as he watches the sun lower over rooftops. The work of months and years is visible not in triumph, but in the quiet function of the city. Systems operate, life proceeds, and the measures of care remain. His contribution exists in patterns, not stories. Threat does not vanish, but it is managed with anticipation rather than reaction. Minor disturbances are addressed without ceremony. The city's continuity depends on this subtle, constant vigilance, not on heroic effort. The lessons of restraint have proven more enduring than force. At last, the chapter closes quietly. The wind traces familiar paths over stone and soil. Roads remain intact. Markets remain orderly. The city continues without the need for central command. Authority, responsibility, and care have been diffused into practice. Leadership, he understands fully, is not the act of conquest or display, but the cultivation of resilience, the shaping of processes, and the steady maintenance of what has been entrusted. It leaves no fanfare. It leaves structures that endure. As evening falls, Balian stands at the edge of the city, watching life unfold without interruption. He feels the weight of continuity fulfilled. The city is neither dependent nor diminished. It persists. The universal principle remains clear. What endures is not the will that commands, but the order that sustains. Systems, structures, and care outlast individuals. Legacy is measured in function, not in fame. The wind moves through the streets, over the walls, along the granaries, and past the markets. Stone and timber remember the discipline of oversight. The city breathes its own rhythm, independent, prepared, enduring. And so the history of Jerusalem's civic leadership in 1187 concludes, not with victory or acclaim, but with the quiet establishment of resilience, the passing of authority, and the formation of a system capable of sustaining life, labor, and justice beyond any single steward. The city awakens with a muted clarity. Light falls unevenly across rooftops, tracing the paths of carts and foot traffic, revealing patterns long established. Balian observes from a distance, no longer moving among the market stalls or through the granaries as he once did. His presence has become ceremonial only in memory. The city itself carries forward the labor of care. Stewards, chosen for their judgment and steadiness, now guide the work. They act not as extensions of him, but as independent agents within a framework he has constructed. Rules, precedents, and recorded procedures govern decisions. Authority flows along these channels rather than radiating from a single hand. Responsibilities transfer gradually. New officials receive guidance not through command but through example and the written record. Minor errors occur, but they are absorbed by the system. The city continues without disruption. The lesson of restraint proves durable. Balian witnesses the subtle reshaping of leadership into continuity. Decisions that once required his intervention are now processed by others who understand the logic of the estate, the city, the markets. Authority has become a layered instrument, not a personal possession. Loss lingers in the background. Friends and older stewards have departed, some to distant holdings, some to age or infirmity. Their absence is felt in personal terms, yet the work of the city is unbroken. Continuity absorbs absence. Stability endures. The road network, repaired and maintained, carries trade and labor as it always has. Minor disputes over routes, access to mills, or timing of deliveries are resolved by stewards. Patterns hold. Movement remains smooth. The city thrives on its own memory. Markets function with predictability. Merchants arrive and depart in measured intervals. Goods are weighed and counted according to established protocols. Prices reflect fairness more than negotiation. Trust circulates quietly, reinforced by consistency. Moral decisions persist in new hands. Balian observes from afar as disputes are resolved with fairness and patience. No single voice dominates. Restraint has become embedded, precedent enforced by those who now carry responsibility. The city balances itself. Internal cost for Balian has not vanished but transformed. He feels fatigue and reflection more as a persistent companion than as a burden. Moments of observation are quieter, more contemplative. He measures the subtle successes of the system, noting that authority has become invisible yet effective. Succession is complete in practice. Authority is now a shared and understood framework. Responsibilities pass quietly between capable hands. Structures persist. Procedures endure. The city operates as it has been prepared to do. Balian's attention shifts to reflection. He sees the city not as an extension of himself, but as an autonomous entity shaped by repeated care. Decisions are embedded in structure, embedded in process, embedded in memory. The work of leadership manifests not in spectacle, but in the persistent, quiet function of the city. Threat remains present at the margins. Traders test routes, laborers press limits, disputes surface. Yet the city's framework absorbs these pressures. Responses are methodical, measured, and impartial. The lessons of restraint and preparation hold. The internal cost manifests subtly now, as awareness of time and its passage. Balian senses the narrowing of influence into observation and counsel rather than action. Personal ambition has faded. Purpose has been fulfilled in continuity. Reflection deepens on the continuity beyond the individual. Those who follow will inherit the systems, the structures, and the trust embedded in the city. They inherit the result of careful attention sustained over years, not the personal imprint of a single hand. Winter returns to the city with predictable rhythm. Cold settles into stone, water gathers in channels, roofs bear the weight of snow. The system he has nurtured responds without disruption. Fires burn in houses, markets remain orderly, labor continues. Continuity holds. Authority has shifted fully from presence to structure. Balian's role becomes that of witness and advisor. He is no longer required to act in most situations. Responsibility now flows along the channels he has constructed, a testament to systems over spectacle. Succession is measured in practice rather than ceremony. New stewards act decisively, guided by precedent. Corrections are applied through rules, not personality. Learning is encoded into procedure. The city functions independently. Loss remains quietly. Those absent, those departed, leave voids that the system absorbs. The work continues uninterrupted, demonstrating the durability of care over individual action. Leadership has left its mark not in names but in patterns. Reflection on continuity expands. The city operates as a living network of labor, trade, and justice. Authority, once centralized, is now distributed through structure, procedure, and expectation. Balian witnesses this evolution without need for intervention. Threat and disorder persist in small, manageable forms. Minor thefts, errors, or disputes arise. The system adjusts. Predictable enforcement, guided by precedent and method, maintains balance. Stability is the achievement, not conquest. The wind moves through streets, along roads, and over fields. It carries the sense of time and repeated care. Stone, timber, and earth retain the imprint of years of attention. The city breathes with this memory. Balian stands at the edge of the city one last time. He observes movement, labor, and exchange continuing without his direction. Authority has dissolved into structure, responsibility into practice. Continuity has been secured. The chapter concludes quietly. Leadership is no longer measured by presence, spectacle, or command. It is measured by the endurance of systems, the stability of structures, and the capacity of a city to function independently. What persists is not the hand that rules, but the framework that sustains. The lesson is immutable. Authority is strongest when it survives beyond those who wield it. The land beyond the city stirs with light before the sun itself arrives. Dust rises from roads long traveled, leaves tremble on olive trees, and stone walls absorb the slow heat of dawn. The world is patient, indifferent to names, yet responsive to care. Balian moves through these edges with quiet observation. His steps no longer measure authority but reflect attention. The city and estates breathe in their rhythm, requiring only awareness rather than intervention. The passage of seasons is visible in the soil, in the shape of roads, in the movement of labor. Responsibilities have shifted completely to structures and individuals trained in precedent. Markets, roads, granaries, and households continue under predictable rules. Authority has become invisible and thus enduring. The work of years manifests not in ceremony but in pattern. He observes the repetition of cycles: sowing, harvest, repair, trade, dispute, resolution. Each cycle repeats itself with subtle variation, informed by the decisions embedded over decades. The system is self-correcting. Stability is habitual. Moral questions arise now in subtler forms. Actions taken too quickly could disturb the balance. Hesitation carries risk as well. Yet the framework absorbs these uncertainties, converting them into incremental adjustments rather than crisis. Restraint continues to be the guiding principle. The cost of leadership is visible in memory, in reflection. Balian feels the accumulation of years in quiet fatigue, in loss of companions, in awareness of what cannot be controlled. Yet the system he leaves behind carries more than he could ever enact alone. Continuity transcends presence. Succession is fully enacted. Stewards act with authority that is both independent and informed by precedent. Knowledge flows through structures, not through the singular voice of a lord. The city functions, the estates endure, and the systems expand where appropriate. Disorder remains only in minor, contained forms. A delayed delivery, a temporarily blocked road, a small dispute over labor. Each is absorbed and corrected methodically. The absence of spectacle does not diminish the weight of authority. It enhances its endurance. Balian's reflection widens. The city and estates are more than land, stone, and labor. They are networks of trust, expectation, and continuity. Authority, exercised with care over time, becomes structure, embedded in habits, recorded in ledgers, and carried in the understanding of those who follow. The wind rises, carrying the scent of olive trees, the warmth of sun-warmed stone, and the distant sound of labor. It moves across roads, markets, and granaries, indifferent to those who named them, faithful only to the cycles established by attention and care. Power is no longer a hand imposing direction. It is the invisible shaping of systems, the quiet calibration of labor and trade, the embedding of precedent that survives beyond the individual. Authority has become durability. Leadership has become endurance. Observation reveals subtle expansion, not in territory or force, but in reliability, predictability, and trust. The city grows inward, stabilizing where weakness once threatened, reinforcing where past errors left uncertainty. Growth is careful, controlled, and sustainable. Responsibility now exists in practice rather than in figure. Decisions arise from the system and its participants, guided by precedent. The city functions with less need for direct intervention, yet with greater coherence than before. Stability is complete. Loss, fatigue, and absence remain but are transformed. They are integrated into the system as points of reflection and improvement. The cost of leadership is internalized, no longer externalized through crisis or spectacle. Wisdom endures quietly. Reflection broadens to the philosophical. Leadership is not measured by acts performed but by structures created, by systems maintained, by continuity preserved. The legacy of care surpasses the visibility of action. Endurance outlasts prominence. Succession has been enacted without ceremony. Authority flows seamlessly into new hands. Experience, precedent, and structure have replaced individual command. The city and estates continue, shaped by prior care, capable of self-correction, resilient under pressure. The wind moves through streets, across fields, and over the olive groves. It is the same wind as decades past, indifferent to names, attentive only to the rhythm imposed by care and restraint. Stone, timber, and soil retain memory, passing it forward in repetition and pattern. The city awakens fully under this framework. Labor, trade, repair, and vigilance continue without interruption. Authority no longer needs to be present. It exists in process, precedent, and attention sustained across time. Balian observes quietly, knowing that what endures is not the hand that once acted, but the framework that has been established. The estate, the city, the systems, all are aligned to continue beyond his presence. The light strengthens, roads dry, markets operate smoothly, granaries are full, and the laborers move with quiet precision. The world carries forward, guided by embedded structure rather than individual command. Continuity is evident. The final realization settles. Leadership is not the exercise of power, but the cultivation of endurance. Authority is measured not by control, but by the survival and stability of the systems entrusted to care. The individual passes, structure persists, and as the day deepens, Balian steps aside, no longer necessary to the city's motion, yet ever present in its rhythm. The wind rises again, moving across stone and soil. What lasts is not his action, but what he has set to endure. The chapter closes quietly. The land, the city, and the estates remain. Order persists. Stability endures. Leadership has dissolved into structure, and care has become continuity. The lesson is clear. What survives is not presence but preparation. What matters is endurance beyond the hand that guides it. The city wakes slowly after a long night, its streets shadowed and empty, yet already alive with the rhythm of labor returning. Dust rises where carts have passed, and the olive trees sway gently, their leaves whispering in the morning wind. The stone walls absorb the first light, carrying warmth from the sun into the hours ahead. The pulse of Jerusalem is quiet, measured, yet unbroken. Balian moves among it as always, but differently now. His presence is lighter, almost incidental. He observes the city systems in motion. Markets opening, guards pacing their beats, granaries issuing supplies, roads carrying traffic. Each element flows according to rules he has shaped, precedent he has maintained. Authority now resides in method more than motion. Responsibility has shifted outward. Orders no longer need constant reinforcement. The city anticipates its needs. Laborers adjust without instruction. Traders follow routines established long before. Justice operates on expectation, not command. Systems carry the work of leadership quietly, resiliently. Disorder arises only at the margins. A delayed delivery, a minor dispute between merchants, a guard arriving late for his shift. Balian notices these anomalies, not with urgency but with careful attention. Corrective action is precise, measured, and restrained. The city continues without spectacle. Moral questions persist in subtle forms. Decisions taken too quickly could disturb the delicate balance. Choices made without observation could create long-term instability. Balian weighs each act against the rhythms already established. Restraint guides him more than impulse. Even as summer advances, heat pressing against stone and soil, the city continues without interruption. Granaries are full. Roads bear traffic smoothly. Markets hum with predictable rhythm. Labor moves efficiently. Authority manifests not in presence but in persistence, in the enduring structure of systems. The cost of leadership is internalized. Fatigue, loss, and absence mark his body and mind, yet they are no longer distractions. They are the weight of responsibility carried quietly. Balian observes the younger stewards acting with independence, the markets self-regulating, the roads maintained without intervention. Continuity is complete. Succession has been enacted naturally. Responsibility passes through practice, precedent, and observation. Authority flows into new hands without disruption. Balian steps back further, watching the city operate as a living system. Leadership is no longer a personal endeavor. It is embedded in the structures that endure beyond any single individual. Reflection brings clarity. What lasts is not the hand that directs, but the systems that absorb, adjust, and correct. The city's endurance is built upon care, foresight, and the quiet exercise of restraint. Power exercised harshly or visibly may impress, but it does not last. What endures is preparation and attention. Balian walks along familiar streets one last time, not to intervene, but to witness. The markets, the granaries, the roads, the gates, they all function, guided by the invisible framework he has reinforced. Authority exists in absence as much as presence. The city breathes, stable, coherent, resilient. The wind rises, moving over stone and soil, across walls and rooftops. It carries no announcement of names, titles, or deeds, only the memory of careful tending. The city responds to the continuity embedded in its systems, not to the visibility of its leaders. Loss remains as it always does. Old allies, aging stewards, children gone. Yet the structures absorb these absences. Decisions, precedent, and practice ensure that what must continue does. Leadership has transformed into endurance, presence into process. Balian's reflection deepens. Civic life is maintained not by spectacle or authority alone, but by systems that respect labor, habit, and expectation. Stability is the product of restraint, justice, and consistent attention. The city's survival depends on what persists quietly, not on what is performed for notice. Succession is complete. Responsibility has shifted fully to those who act within the frameworks established. Authority is now procedural, systemic, durable. The city functions without reliance on any single hand. Continuity has become its own safeguard. As the day matures, sunlight illuminates the streets and fields. The hum of work continues. Roads bear carts, markets exchange goods, guards patrol with predictable rhythm, granaries store grain. Justice administers disputes. All move in alignment, under the invisible guidance of precedent and care. Balian stands briefly on the edge of the city, feeling the wind carry warmth, dust, and the faint scent of olive groves. The work of years is evident, not in monument but in coherence. Authority is embedded, systems endure. Responsibility has become continuity. The city continues to breathe under this quiet framework. Threats, minor and unavoidable, are managed methodically. Disputes, delays, and disturbances are absorbed and corrected without spectacle. Stability is habitual, not forced. Fatigue, loss, and absence remain as reminders of the cost of care. Yet they are reconciled within the structure. The city's motion, its endurance, and its rhythm bear the imprint of leadership exercised with restraint and attention. Continuity has been secured. The light softens as evening approaches. Shadows stretch across streets, walls, and rooftops. The wind stirs gently, dust lifting briefly before settling. Jerusalem remains aligned, functioning, resilient. The systems of labor, trade, justice, and oversight continue uninterrupted. Balian steps aside completely. His presence is no longer necessary. Leadership has dissolved into the structures he has cultivated. Care has become endurance, and authority exists fully in process rather than in figure. The city thrives in its self-maintained rhythm. And so Chapter 5 closes. What endures is not command, but the alignment of systems. What survives is not visibility, but structure. Leadership is measured not by the hand that guides, but by the framework that persists. Jerusalem remains, steady and resilient, a testament to endurance beyond the individual.